What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button. Let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into another organized crime topic. And over the last several weeks, we are continuing our look at America's crime families in 2025. Where are these families? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Today, we're going to delve into the current Colombo crime family. And I think we can all agree this is surely the weakest, most beleaguered family currently in New York City. Truth of the matter is, when we look at the chart of this family, there may only actually be about 20 to 30 people actually supremely active right now. And when I say that, kicking up, doing things, from what I've heard from multiple sources, there are made members of this family that just kind of do their thing at this point. The story of the current Colombo crime family next on the sit down. The current boss or alleged boss of the Colombo crime family currently is a person called Robert Donofrio. Now, Donofrio hails from Brooklyn. Like many people in the Colombo crime family, it has always had a mainstay in Brooklyn for this group. Now, Donofrio actually came up as a loan shark and was under the tutelage for years of Wild Bill Cotolo. Cotolo would actually make Donofrio into the family in the 80s. Mr. Donofrio was made in a ceremony in late 1988. Also made that night was Joe Legs Legrano and Michael Sesson. Now, Donofrio is still, from what I understand, the owner and proprietor of a produce company in which he took over from his father at one point. So he was involved in his career in both legit and illegitimate businesses. Now, though he was close to Cotolo at one point during the Colombo War, Mr. Donofrio actually was on the other side. He completely switched sides and at one point was even tasked with killing Wild Bill Cotolo. Now, Robert Donofrio today is said to be a very low-key individual. And when he was named boss or allegedly named boss, a lot of people were surprised by it, but understood it. He's a low-key guy, definitely brings some semblance and some calm waters to a family that's had a lot of choppy waters over the years. Now, an interesting fact about Donofrio is he is actually the ex-husband of Angela Raiola, aka Big Ange. Here, Donofrio can be seen with Big Ange and their two kids in happier times. As we know, sadly, about 10 years ago, Big Ange passed away. Now, anybody that will know anything about Donofrio will tell you that he is a respected man. He would ultimately do 8 years in prison for his time in the Colombo crime family, in the Colombo War. He's a guy who I think other families respect, though most people also tell you that he's not going to be the long-term answer to boss. A lot of people say that Mr. Donofrio is keeping the seat warm for Teddy Persico Jr. We'll get to him, though, in just a second. So Donofrio, again, been boss for a couple of years now, low-key guy, definitely a guy who is very respected and, I think can work with other families and be okay with it. Now, the cupboard's not all dry for the Colombo family. Donofrio has earners. There are guys here that are making money, which we'll get to. The underboss, though, of this family is questionable. Who exactly is it? We've heard Joe Waverly. We've heard Benji Castellazzo. And I think at this point, I think it's probably unknown who the UB of this family is. But by name and most recent, we're going to go and tell you a little bit about what we believe is the underboss, I guess probably by name. It's Benjamin the Claw Castellazzo. Now, Mr. Castellazzo is an old man at this point. He is 87 years old and was recently released from lockup after he caught a case, as many of the family did in 2021. Not only was he involved, but other members of this family were involved, including the boss at the time, Andrew Mush Russo. Now, Benjamin Castellazzo goes way back. His criminal career actually started in the late 50s. where he was sentenced to 4 to 8 years for grand larceny after he was involved in stealing a tractor trailer containing carpeting. Now, Mr. Casalazzo will tell you that he was just a carpenter. That's what he told a judge at one point. He's not actually a mobster. We have seen, though, over the years, including this newspaper article, that not only he, but his son was involved in union infiltration and construction infiltration at construction sites like the Javits Center in Manhattan. We've also seen him pop up in all sorts of other crimes as well. This guy has been arrested and did all sorts of prison stints. I mean, at one point, he was selling H in the 70s and went to prison for 4 years for that. In 1995, he was sentenced to 8 months for operating illegal gambling businesses in and around Gravesend, Brooklyn, as well as illegal numbers operations. He was identified as a captain, I believe, in the early 2000s, if I remember correctly. We've seen him arrested during Mob Takedown Day. And the reason his name is the Claw is, according to what we know, he got the name due to the fact that his hands were in everything. He was like a claw. The problem is, though, it didn't really help him, though, late in life, which we'll get into in just a second. Recently, he would do time for extortion. He was involved with a racketeering conspiracy and relating to shaking down a construction company, as well as a pizza sauce recipe war involving L&B Spumoni Gardens, which is in Brooklyn. This guy has been all over the place. He was also arrested at one point over the last 10 years for extorting this pizzeria in Staten Island called The Square. And we would learn a pretty sad thing about Casalazzo at his court case involving that. According to his defense attorney, James T. Pietro, he would show photos of Casalazzo's trailer home that he owned in West Creek, New Jersey with his wife, where homes ranged in prices of $40,000 to $50,000. So this is a guy who has been in the mob for years, made a bunch of money, but is living in a trailer. His wife would ultimately file for bankruptcy. This guy's had real problems. And when he was arrested in 2021, he was actually living at a nursing home at the time. This is a guy who has spent various times in prison and has really just kind of stated that, at this point, he's really struggling. Now, from what we know, his wife would file for bankruptcy in 2011, saying her combined monthly income between her and her husband was approximately $1,115, which is entirely from Social Security. And their monthly net income was negative $490, and that they were paying $450 a month to live in that mobile home near Manahawkin, New Jersey. So things have been struggled for him over the years. Is he the underboss of this family? Maybe by name. That said, we'll figure that he is at this point. But this really goes to show you the state of this family. It's a complete mess. And my guess is, at this point, right now, today, in 2025, I would imagine Mr. Casalazzo is basically retired and probably just UB by name only. We have heard reports that it may be Joe Waverly. And Joe Waverly is an interesting name due to the fact that he's been around for so long. He's a guy who has a lot of respect. He's a guy who, if we want to believe, is very lethal as well. We know that he faced a case at one point for having a New York City police officer killed. This is a guy who is a tough guy for sure and still a very respected man. That said, he's in his 80s as well. Now, the alleged consigliere of this family is very little known Big Ralphie DiMatteo. Now, we actually know more about Ralph DiMatteo's brother, Luca, who is said to be a captain as well in this family. The DiMatteos came up in Brooklyn, have always been very involved with gambling, loan sharking, and they're actually very close to Joe Waverly Cacace. Now, DiMatteo actually gained infamy in 2021 after he was also involved in the same racketeering conspiracy that put not only Teddy Persico in prison, but Casalazzo in prison. DiMatteo can be seen in this photo with his wife behind him as they're in Florida. He was one of the only people to not be picked up in that criminal case. His son, Angelo, then tweeted this photo, which gave his whereabouts, and he eventually had to turn himself in for this. And this became a worldwide story. He was asked about the photo, and he said, "I have no regrets. It was a great photo." But there's not a lot known about Ralph DiMatteo. He's a pretty secret guy. Obviously, was involved a lot in gambling and those sorts of things, unions. But he is still allegedly the consigliere of this family and is currently in federal prison. Now, I mentioned earlier the seat probably is being kept warm for Teddy Persico. Now, Teddy Persico is the nephew of longtime Colombo Crime Family boss Carmine Jr. Persico. His father, Theodore Teddy Persico, died in 2017, but his son has kept on the namesake of what the Persicos are, and that has always been to be the leaders of the Colombo Crime Family. We know how drunk with power not only Teddy Persico is, but Alley Boy Persico was, Carmine Persico was. The goal is for as long as possible to keep the Persicos in charge of the Colombo Crime Family. And Teddy Persico, who is currently in prison, will actually be eligible for release in summer of 2025. So just a matter of a couple of months from now, will Teddy be released from prison? Now, he was made at just 23 years old. And interestingly enough, he'd be made alongside Tommy Shots Jueli, who we'll talk about in a second as well. Persico would gain infamy for the fact that he was in prison and got approval to go to his grandmother's funeral in Brooklyn. At the funeral, he somehow was able to tell counterparts of his to kill Joey Scopo, who was another member of the Colombo Crime Family. And this would ultimately happen in 1993 and would signal essentially the end of the Persico Arena war. Joey Scopo was whacked as he got out of his car near his home. And this was ordered allegedly by Teddy Persico from shackles at a funeral, somehow got through U.S. Marshals to do this. And he ended up getting 12 years for this little stunt. Persico, like all these people, is no stranger to prison. He's been in prison for many years throughout his life. Now, what's interesting is in the current trip to prison that he's in, at his sentencing, he would state to the judge in that case, quote, he has no desire to be boss, which is an insane thing to say and really shows you the current state of the American Mafia, that he is not only recognizing that he is in the mafia and that there is a mafia, but he's recognizing that he has no desire to be boss publicly, which is an insane thing to say. But again, it just illustrates what this whole thing is at this point, that someone can say that. Now, is he being truthful? Probably not. Do I expect him to probably take the mantle of the family when he gets out towards the end of this year? Probably. I think you'd be crazy to not think so. Now, I do want to talk about some of the captains in this family and some of the ones that are making some money at this point. And one of them I've talked about before, and that's Joe Amato Sr., who was born in late 1958. Joe Amato, I've done a video about, and the full video can be seen here. I'll make sure I include that. I would say right now, from a captain standpoint, Joseph Amato is powerful. At one point, he would claim that Staten Island is, quote, his island. And he has been a captain out on Staten Island for years. He, like Robert Donofrio, came up in Brooklyn under some of the powerful people in Brooklyn and Queens. And you look at today, I mean, this is a guy who's done time. And in Staten Island is probably one of the more powerful people in the mob in general. You know, Staten Island is now a place where a lot of mobsters live and have always lived. But Joe Amato is a respected guy. And he is also kind of a dumb guy. And I'll talk about that in a second. He has been for years involved with everything from gambling to loan sharking to unions. His own son at one point was involved in the mafia, Joe Amato Jr. I will say Joe Amato Jr., who went to prison over being connected to the mob. I've heard various things about him. One person, in fact, multiple people would tell me that he's a complete jerk off. That was their word, not mine. But I do want to make it clear. He is someone that, from what I understand, has left the life of crime behind. From what I understand, he has got his master's degree, which we'll give him credit for. You know, I think the job here to me is always to, you know, look, we have to say what we're going to say, but it is also important to say what maybe some people won't say. And I think the goal is to always paint these people as they can never leave this world. But I give Joe Amato Jr. a lot of credit for leaving the life. His father, though, has had some pretty wild things that he said over the years. He recently did 70 months in prison and has done, like I said, several sentences over the years. According to court filings in the mid-2010s, Amato allegedly stalked and threatened his girlfriend between January of 15 and October of 2016, during which he had to regularly and covertly retrieve a GPS tracking device, repositioning it on her car. They allegedly resumed those activities in May of 2017 when he obtained a replacement tracking device in order to surveil her movements. Now, Amato would boast about these resources at his disposal. In an email he would send to her, he would state, quote, "This is my island, not yours. I have eyes all over. I'm a man's man. Anyone can end up in jail. I don't wish it on anyone, especially weak men who can never deal with it. I thrive there and anywhere I go." So Joe Amato is no stranger to prison. He has no problem going to prison. He has no problem putting tracking devices on women's cars. I also, from what I understand, at one point, I mentioned in the video I did on Anthony Camello that Camello at one point was trying to impress Mr. Amato. And I talked about how Amato Jr. and Camello were friends at one point. I have heard through various sources that they were not happy that I made that comment in that video. Again, though, we're truthful on this show. That's what we do. I'm going to guess that Joe Amato Sr. wouldn't be very happy if he ever saw me in person. I'm guessing that he's not a big fan of mine, but some guys aren't. Joe Amato, though, is very powerful. He makes money. He's got people around him, including guys like Giovanni, Johnny Brains, Sorbonne, Thomas Sorsha, all sorts of guys that are making money under him. And if there's someone kicking up a healthy envelope to the higher ups in this family, it's absolutely Joey Amato. I think down the road, he could be some sort of hierarchy figure at some point. One of the other names who was recently released from prison is Tommy Shots Gioeli. What is his status today in the mob? He did a long prison sentence. We know that over the years, he was supervising a crew out on Long Island, one of which Dino Calabro was involved in. Little Dino Saraceno. We know that he was close with Joe Waverly at one point, did a long sentence in prison. We do know, though, that according to a blog that Tommy Shots wrote back in 2022, he has, late stage prostate cancer. And as someone who, my own father died from prostate cancer, stage 4, stage 5, I mean, there's no coming back from that. We also know that, Tommy Shots kind of denounced that life at one point. Do I think he's involved today? I'm going to guess no. He is, I don't think, in the medical condition to be involved in the mob. But hey, I guess stranger things have happened. I mean, not normally do these guys go and just quit. But I think if there is a candidate to do that, it would probably be Tommy Shots. I don't know what his current standing is in the mob. I think one thing I learned about the Colombo family through various people is that it's just kind of a free-for-all. There are charts out there, but a lot of the guys that are on the charts is like soldiers. I mean, some of them are old. We don't know where they are. Like some are, getting out of prison. I think the general thought is like, what are we really a part of anymore? When you see all these soldiers, I think when you see a chart, like there are definitely functional guys that are doing things, guys that are doing rackets, but there are guys that are just by name only still in this family. Like, do I think John Staluppi is still connected to the mob? No. I mean, he's a billionaire, essentially. Why would he be connected? But at one point, he was made, and it's been alleged that he's a member of this family. So a lot of the guys you'll see on these charts, they've almost kind of been inactive for years. So when I say, like, right now, I think there's probably, obviously, your hierarchy, there's captains. I would say at most, as far as functional members, making money, doing things, I would think the Colombo family is probably down to 20, 30 guys at this point. Now they probably have 60, 70 members total. But it is beleaguered. It is weak for sure. Another person that we've seen gain captain status over the last 5 to 10 years is a familiar name, Carmine Persico. Obviously, it's not the one of old. He has passed away, but it is the half brother of Teddy Persico, a person called Carmine Persico. He's in his 50s. He is obviously the namesake of of a family member. There are so many Persicos connected to the Colombo family. This guy's been involved with gambling, loan sharking, extortion. He has done all sorts of stuff over the years, and we would know that his name popped up involving his half brother Teddy Persico when the FBI caught Teddy, Carmine, and a person called Andre Diapiche attempting to shake down a glass business. They overheard these three using threats to collect a $25,000 loan shark debt from a Staten Island shop owner and that victim. Now, this was just after Teddy Persico was released on a state prison beef. Now, Diapiche, who I mentioned, is also a reputed member of this family and the cousin of Teddy and Carmine Persico. So again, the family lines go very deep in these families, literally like blood family members. They're all related and they're all functioning members of the Colombo crime family. I mean, you would go crazy trying to go over all the different Persicos: Sean Persico, Michael Persico, Carmine Persico, Teddy Persico. There's all sorts of Persicos. And I'm not going to confuse you with all that. But in his 50s, Carmine Persico would be one of the youngest people in the family today. And we'd have to imagine down the road that his half brother maybe elevates him at some point to a sitting hierarchy spot. I mean, you look at, I would think at this point in the Colombo family, the most powerful people: Teddy Persico, Robert Donofrio, Joey Amato, Carmine Persico, like those guys. Those are the ones that I think, with these old guys like the Castellazos and the Gioellis and the Cacaces, they're older and they're going to die in the next several years. So again, the younger guys, if you will, are the ones I just mentioned. Now, one of the big questions is the imminent release from prison of Vito Guzzo. I think there's two questions we have about Guzzo at this point. Is he, when he gets out, which he'll be out over the next several months completely, is he truly out of the life, or is he just saying what he has to say to get released? And when he comes out from the First Step Act, he goes right back to the life. I mean, if you know anything about Vito Guzzo, the likelihood of him retiring is slim to none, probably. This is a dead-in-the-wool gangster, a guy who's been a gangster his entire life. This is a guy who has no problem hurting people. This is a guy who pled guilty to 5 bodies. He did 30 years. Okay, again, I've said this time and time again. If you just think these people are going to come home, unless they have like some sort of super bad medical issue like a Ronnie Trucchio or a Tommy Schatz, Vito Guzzo is going to come out, do his supervised release, find a way to be still connected and do what he does. That's what these guys do. He'll be an interesting name to talk about because from what we know about Vito, he came up under Fat Patty Catalano, who is a Colombo captain in Queens. His father was in the Colombo family, Vito Guzzo Sr. He did time in prison as being a member of the Giannini crew, copped to 5 bodies, killed John Borrelli, killed Stephen Pagnozzi, killed all these people, drug dealer, arsonist. I mean, this guy was a real scourge, and that's what they referred him to as, or a scourge of Western Queens. This guy at one point, Vito Guzzo, was called the next John Gotti. And I think that was for newspaper sales, but here he could be seen with John Papa. I mean, you look at the bodies between these two guys, I mean, you're in the double digits. To think that Vito Guzzo, after his supervision is over, do I think he just comes home and goes and becomes a carpenter or a movie ticket salesman or something? No, it's just not worthy to think about. Throw in the fact that he's from Queens. It's not a lot of representation in Queens, Long Island. Could I see him going right back to the game? Absolutely. Here's an interesting name to keep an eye on. And when I do these videos, I always think back to the episode Sopranos when they do like the what's the mob up to today, and all the guys are coming out, Phil Leotardo, Tony Blundetta. They all have kind of different roles, and some will go here, some will go there. But Vito Guzzo's been inside a long time. Is he still active? I think it's crazy to not think so. I mean, he was made in a prison bathroom. He got into a fight with Albanians in prison. Vito Guzzo today is one of, in fact, probably top 3 list of most violent real-life gangsters today still in the mob. He's a stonewall gangster through and through. So he'll be an interesting guy to look out for as he gets out of prison. We also know his half brother Anthony is a member of the Lucchese crime family. He knows a lot of people, so it'll be interesting. But I think there's some tinges of optimism if you're in the Colombo family. There are some guys that I think are bringing up the rear and can keep this family going, but it is beleaguered at this point. I think it's real simple to understand. Next video, we'll get into the Gambino crime family in 2025. I got some great videos coming up, guys. This week coming up, the week of the 9th, I have a really great interview coming out with an individual who spent several years in the ADX out in Colorado. We talked about so many cool, interesting things. How did he get there? What did he do? What sent him to ADX? We talked about Freddie Gias. We talked about Vinny Gorgeous. We talked about Tommy Patera, Wayne Silk Perry, Chapo Guzman, Cabani Savage, Larry Hoover, Jeff Fort. We talked about all sorts of people. So you got to check that interview out. You're really going to enjoy it. We'll keep the looks at the families going as well. Just got a lot of cool things planned. So make sure you check that out. If you'd like to support my channel further, hit that super thanks icon below the video. We'll see you next week here on The Sit Down.